All right, 7:35 in the morning. You are on Wake Up Tucson. This next interview, we're going to go probably through a range of emotions, and we're going to start off with first pure happiness because my very good friend Jack Fried is on the phone calling in from Long Island. Jack, what's up, buddy?
How you doing, Christopher? Thank you for having me on.
Living the damn dream out here, Jack. That's what I'm doing. Living the dream, buddy.
Fantastic.
Jack and I first met in Mr. Sapolsky's geometry class at Herrick's High School. And the way it worked out, we were sitting next to each other in different rows, right? And I introduced myself to him. Jack seemed like a likable lad. And he says, "Oh, yeah, you're Chris. You got that. You have that Greek last name, right?" That's how whoever you heard DeSimone, maybe, however you said it was great. And I told him with a straight face, "Yeah, my last name is Zeus." So poor Jack for about 5 weeks thought my last name was Zeus, which was totally hilarious. And then I said, "All right, I'm being a total jerk. It's DeSimone, it's Goomba, sorry." So, and ever since then, I don't know why he didn't get rid of me. Jack and I have been good friends no matter where we've lived on the planet Earth. So.
You're a good soul.
You are too. Now that we've gotten the Mutual Admiration Society over together, I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, I wasn't surprised. It's not like you're not literate or something. You're a doctor of optometry. You're one of the smarter guys I know in the world. But you wrote a book.
I did.
What? Give me the origin of the book and why. Why did you start writing a book?
Well, the book actually started out as a cathartic exercise. Personally, I'll give you a little rundown quickly about my background.
Sure.
I'm actually a first-generation American, born here to immigrants from Israel. My mother's family immigrated here in 1958. My father's family immigrated here in 1967, both from Israel. They were born there. They grew up there, moved here in their teenager years. They met here. Their parents, both of their parents, are Holocaust survivors, Auschwitz to be exact.
Wow.
Now, growing up, I never knew from anything. My siblings didn't know from anything about their past. My cousins didn't know anything about their past. My parents did, uncles and aunts did, but it was something that was just never spoken about. It was just a very dark time. You don't need to expose, being a parent, you don't need to expose your children to such horrible things. The one thing that actually, for me personally, psychologically, I had always suffered from a severe form of separation anxiety ever since I was a child, ever since before I could even remember. My parents would tell me stories that, to me now as an adult, make complete sense. But it was something that was just always with me. It was kind of like one of my demons. This feeling of not wanting to leave my family unit, not wanting to leave my house to go to school as a child. It was debilitating. So I bounced around from, child psychologist to child psychologist back in the early and mid 80s. Psychology was a completely different arena back then. No one was able to pin anything out. No one was able to tell me what was going on. No one was able to tell my parents what was going on in terms of the origins to my anxiety, how to cope with it, what to do, how to deal.
Was there any comfort in talking to these folks, or was it just become more frustrating as each psychologist went on?
Exceptionally more frustrating. I felt like if I was left alone to deal with this on my own, I'd be better off. Socially, back then, going to a child psychologist didn't help the situation because, it was a social stigma back then. Now it's a different story. But back then it was a social stigma that ended up putting more pressure on me. And it's just something that I didn't want to have to deal with. It's something that I didn't want to have to face. So like any child left with a situation that's kind of difficult, you learn how to deal. You learn how to cope. You develop coping mechanisms. You learn how to live from day to day. But when I tell you, Chris, that this was something that, you wake up in the morning with this feeling in your gut, oh my gosh, I don't want to leave. to do any when situations around my personal life started to change. Any type of situation that would cause stress, these feelings would come out, even more. Fast forward, went to high school. I don't know if you or any of our friends even realized that there was something.
Yeah, I was going to say when you hung out with us in those days, this is 10th grade of high school, you were quite a social guy, and you did a lot of social bonding, crazy crap with us for 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what happened at that point? What was different then? Were you just hiding it really well, or
that's exactly what was going on, and a life. A lifetime of having to deal with something like this, you tend to hide it. You can hide it pretty well. I had moved from Queens to Long Island when I was in ninth grade, but I had my mother actually continue to commute me to my old school. I wanted to finish up there. Again, separation from my friends, separation from anything was just incredibly traumatic to me. And I just thought it was just my thing. I thought it was just something, for some reason, hey, some people are born with certain ailments. This was my thing to battle. This was something I had to deal with, which I did on my own steam as a teenager. If you remember, I ran track, which was incredibly therapeutic for me. Anything I can do to distract myself, either socially with my friends, immersing myself with you guys in your basement with all the games and everything we used to play.
D&D and poker on a Friday night, either one. We alternated.
D&D, poker, Atari. You remember the Atari?
9 o'clock, we went to La Mizzanetta for a slice of pizza.
That's right. Meatball onion, if I remember.
Thank you. Holy cow! Hold on, I got to get my sound box for that. That was a perfect. Where is that? Damn. Meatball and onion was the best pie they ever did at the.
Meatball onion, and they are still there.
God bless it. God bless it. And then, of course, you ran track with Joe McMahon. Nothing can be more distracting than that. That's
correct. That was incredible. I mean, I don't have to explain to you. His personality is just he lights up a room.
You are correct.
So attaching myself to someone like him and someone like you was a wonderful distraction. I mean, it was great energy, and it completely distracted me. And that's what I needed. I needed distractions. I needed ways to divert my attention from what was going on inside with the turmoil. To what was going on the outside. Over time, I realized that our minds are basically the interface between what's going on in our inner world and what's going on with the outer world. What we allow in and what we allow out, it gets translated in our mind. It gets translated with our experiences, with our thoughts, with our philosophies, with everything that has an impact on us. So somewhere after I got married, I ended up going into private practice. Pressures of life started to take its toll, and the pressure cooker started to build up. And I found myself with the same exact feelings as an adult that I had as a child.
So let's do this, Jack. We're going to go take a commercial break. When we come back, Jack's going to talk more about his book. It's called The Heirs of Auschwitz, a true story of Holocaust, transforming intergenerational trauma and the meaning of life. Meaning of existence, excuse me. So I apologize. Yep. I got Monty Python on my brain. I apologize. And the meaning of existence. We're going to find, Jack's going to tell you what he found out was the reason for these feelings he had growing up and into adulthood. So question or comment, 790-2040. You're on Wake Up Tucson, 1030 The Voice. We know how to spoil Jack Fried with some Rush bumper music today.
I was just going to say.
You're like, this is weird.
Of radio. I'm sorry. This is fantastic. I loved it. It's fan-freaking-tastic.
Talk radio is good for you. See that? There you go.
We anticipate the needs of all of our guests.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm looking at a picture of the Holy Trinity right now.
Thank you. Rest in peace, Neil.
Yes, yes.
The book's called Heirs of Auschwitz, the true story of Holocaust, transforming intergenerational trauma and the meaning of existence. Didn't your publishing company say, that's kind of a long title, Jack.
No, they actually had me change the title.
Ah.
They didn't like the original title. My original title was Holocaust Mentality.
Oh, okay.
And they didn't like it. My approach was a little bit different, but it was interesting because the way the book started out is completely different than the way it ended up. It just morphed. It took on a life of its own.
So tell me about, last we let off, you're talking about you're an adult, you're married, you got 3 great kids, you're doing your thing, and then all of a sudden these feelings start to come back that you experienced as a kid and a young man. So kind of what do we think kind of triggered that? And then as you went deep, where did it, when you finally found out where it comes from, tell us that part of the story.
Yeah. So I started feeling an incredible amount of pressure, just coming, normal type of pressure that everybody else experiences going through life, nothing out of the usual. But my reaction to it, my internal reaction to it was completely out of proportion to what was going on. And that's been kind of a repeating thing throughout my life. And it got to the point where I decided, something's got to be done. There's got to be a reason for this. It has to be coming from somewhere. It has to be. And if that's the case, then, so much for tabula rasa, because,
the blank slate.
Like John Locke, exactly, blank slate. You're born with a blank slate. Well, not from my experience, we're not. It was something that evolved. So I started going to see a psychologist. I did not think in the beginning that seeing a psychologist in adulthood would help, but I relented. I wanted to see someone who didn't know me, who didn't know my past, who didn't have any knowledge about me at all. I needed someone to look at me with a trained eye and figure out what was going on. It had gotten to the point, Chris, where I started seeing several psychologists. I started seeing psychologists who specialized in past life regression. I mean, I was desperate. I really needed to find where these thoughts were coming from, where these feelings were coming from, why with such intensity. So I finally found a psychologist who brought some information out for me that I, quite frankly, had no idea. We're sitting there at one session, and she said something to me that completely blew me away. After the first couple of sessions of her getting acquainted with me, my background, my family, asking all these questions. So she basically said to me, she said, Jack, you need to understand that your childhood was far, far from normal. You did not grow up in a normal household. You did not grow up. And I quite honestly, my first response was I took offense to that. How would you know? How could you judge? You weren't there.
Right.
You don't know what was going on. How could you make such a severe statement like that? So she basically went on to explain. She goes, you need to understand you're a product. You are a child, 3rd generation, born to Holocaust survivors from both sides. Double whammy, double jeopardy. You need to understand that separation meant death. You were separated, death, that's it. You're never going to see your family again. And it was incredibly traumatic. And for me, this was all, again, normal growing up. No one spoke about it. No one spoke to the children about it. We all knew something bad happened. We all knew there was a tattoo on my grandparents' arm. Every time, maybe twice, I tried speaking to my grandfather when I was a small child about, what was going on. He wouldn't speak to me. He wouldn't say anything about it. I would probably have done the same, being in his shoes, trying to protect my children, my grandchildren from such horror. So what ended up happening is she started explaining to me that there's a lot of research being done in the field right now, particularly in genetic science, called epigenetics. Epigenetics is the science that deals with inherited trauma. Trauma, science is starting to show that trauma can be inherited through the genes, just like you inherit blue eyes, just like you inherit brown hair, just like you inherit every other aspect of your physical and psychological makeup. Trauma is no different. It's one of the ways that we adapt to our environment.
Now, is there also, can be added to that, the fact that even though no one directly talked about it, just kind of the way everyone acted in the family, knowing that your grandparents were all Holocaust survivors, does that, the way they kind of talk and act, does that contribute to this? Even though they don't directly talk about it?
Absolutely. Absolutely, without question. As a matter of fact, growing up, that all seemed normal. Just the way everyone would act, the way everyone would speak. That was all normal to me. So I didn't have anything to compare normal to not normal, or normal to a variant of normal. Over the years, whenever I would meet up with cousins from Canada, cousins from Israel, cousins from who have also, we're all part of the same genetic pool. Also descendants of Holocaust survivors. It was interesting because they had the same idiosyncrasies that I had. And I found myself as an adult, I wouldn't want to get up and go to work. I wouldn't want to get up and leave my children. I wouldn't want to get up and leave my wife in fear of not ever seeing them again. And it was that completely illogical, completely, where is this coming from?
Right.
It had gotten to the point, it was so frustrating, it was so debilitating, I needed to figure out a way to figure out, number one, where it's coming from, why it was there, what can I do about it? You can't, I can go on the next 40, hopefully 50 years of my life with the same mentality, dealing with the same coping mechanisms, not getting anywhere, running around in circles. Or I could face what's going on and try to figure out where it's coming from, what to do about it, what was the cause. You can't really, I knew what the effect was. I didn't know what the cause of the effect was. So in order for me to change the effect, you need to go back to the root cause.
All right, now we're going to run out of time, so I want to do a couple of things before we do that. One, the book is called Heirs of Auschwitz, a true story of Holocaust transforming intergenerational trauma and the meaning of existence. A question I have for you, if Jack of 2020 could get in his time machine and go back and see your grandfather right before little Jack was going to ask him about the Holocaust, what would you counsel your grandfather? What would you tell him? Do the same thing or do something different?
Do everything exactly the same.
Okay.
Do everything as if there was no prior knowledge to the future.
Because what I was thinking is, should he have been more open with you?
There's no right answer.
Okay.
There's no right answer. I've spoken to my other grandparents. They were they didn't really talk about it much either. But it seems as though whenever the subject would come up, it just didn't really go anywhere good. Nothing good would come from it. So we just kind of left it alone. It's in the past. Move on. Look forward. Move ahead.
All right. Back. So one last question for you, because we got about a minute. Just real quick, I want people to read the book, Heirs of Auschwitz. It's on Amazon. You can pre-order it right now. It releases on March 31st. What is... In 30 seconds or less, give me a word that's part of the coping mechanism that you're now learned. Now that you know all this, give me a real brief. What's a coping mechanism in your brain to make this better?
One word.
Yeah.
It's a loaded question.
We don't ask unloaded questions here at Wake Up Tucson.
I don't know if I can hand that over in 30 seconds.
That's okay. Just give me real quick. Don't forget about the one word answer. Just tell me real quick. Give me a coping mechanism that you learned.
Self-exploration.
Okay.
It's not so much coping mechanisms. It's knowing that there's a purpose out there. There's a reason behind the creation. There's a reason behind everything, behind existence. Delving into things like Jewish mysticism, looking for answers. It's all in there. It's all in the book. It's all what it's all about. Learning how to rewire your mind, learning how to retrain yourself how to think, and it's all doable and it's all possible. And I'm a living witness to that, because those fears, those anxieties they're not there anymore. I'm not saying that it's gone. It's just it's transformed. It's a transformative process. It's something that requires constant mental thought, discipline, retraining how you think things work is not really how they work.
All right, sir, we got to get going. It was amazing talking to you today. Good luck on the book. I hope this helps a lot of people out there. And you should come out and visit us in Tucson soon. I was looking at the airfares, amazingly cheap right now for some reason.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine why, but hopefully